Hi, welcome to this Business Leader Breakthroughs Minisode, where we highlight the best bits of a previous show episode. If you enjoy these quick insights and want to check out the full episode, you'll find the link in the show notes. Or go to thebreakthrough.co. Now let the breakthroughs begin. Welcome along to this week's episode. I'm Ryan Castle and joined by my business partner, Dr. Mike Ashby.
Personal confession, really, which is I don't want to manage. I don't want to manage. I realised this a little while ago. In fact, it was part of the reason that I got out of corporate was I thought, I don't want to manage. I want to go into business. I want to play. I want to play. I want to create. I want to build. I want to go fishing. But I don't want to manage because management's hard.
Yeah, hard work.
It is hard work.
Yeah.
So
and sometimes not so much fun.
No.
Yeah, it can be, but at times it's also not.
Well,
whereas the next acquisition or the next new product development is like, want to get part of that.
Yeah, and I think it's a real problem unless you kind of confront that, own up to it and go, okay, I'm not the world's greatest manager. Then it becomes a matter of, well, if you're not the world's best manager, then what are you doing with your managers? Because if you're not a very good manager, you're probably not going to run a very good management team. Because you're not going to do the basics of management, which are, for me, the difference between management and leadership is management is about managing individuals and leadership is about leading teams. Was the bigger picture, where do I take people, where do I take this organization, what's possible, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's true of many of the business owners we've worked with. They love the idea of process consistency. They love the idea of detail. And I see a lot of business owners struggling with this thing, that they don't want to manage, so they do it reluctantly. And how does that play out? It means that their managers never get much beyond doers. And so the leaders, let's distinguish between the owners and the managers. And the owners end up doing the manager's job.
And I was reading a HBR article about the reasons why people leave their jobs.
Oh, yeah?
What do you think the number one reason was that people depart their jobs?
Pay, maybe?
No. Number one is the relationship they have with their current manager.
Yeah.
So if you've got a retention challenge in your business, the first place to look would be how are your managers looking after the staff? Yeah. And if you've got a direct retention issue, as in your direct reports leaving you as a business owner, what did someone say? Start with the man in the mirror?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's, I think one of the things you have to accept as a business owner, as a business leader, is that the outcomes you get are actually your responsibility. Everything that happens inside that organization is your responsibility, which means you might not have done it, or you might not have done anything. Either way, you're responsible because the people who are working there, how they perform, that's your responsibility. So I think part of it, working with business owners, is helping them understand the difference between leadership and management. They don't want to do their manager's job for them, which is how it often feels, right?
Yes, yep, totally.
They end up kind of doing their job for them. They end up micromanaging. They end up just pissing their managers off. But worse than that is that their managers never get a sense of space. They never get a sense of opportunity to grow, right? But you still have to take ownership of clarifying the expectations with your people. You can't contract that out. And I don't want to give the impression that as a leader you can contract that all out. It just means that your kind of sphere of influence is much less about getting them to do their job and more about enabling them as managers. And that's, people will work well if they're clear about what's expected of them. And I think a lot of managers fail to perform because their leaders are not clear about expectations. This is what I want you to do. Instead, they just go and do it for them. That should work.
Yeah.
Long term.
And then the leader gets incredibly frustrated that they're going, that phrase we hear from our owners all the time, I feel like I'm doing my manager's job for them. And guess what? If that's how you're feeling, it's probably how your manager's team is feeling as well, because your managers are going, I feel like I'm doing my team's job for them, because that's the way the organisation's been set from the top.
And I think if you feel like you're doing your manager's job, it's because you're doing a poor job managing. That's fundamentally it.
Oh, that was
I
nice.
know.
That was
I know.
nice.
It's a harsh but fair.
Yeah. Can you say that one again?
If you feel like you're doing your manager's job for them, it's because you're doing a poor job managing them.
Nice. That was good. That was good. Yeah, 2 in a row. Nailed it.
Yeah. If you're having to do that, you have failed to be clear about the expectations. You have failed to coach them. You've failed to have conversations with them about how they might go about that. What's the learning about when to apply this judgment? Or you've failed to train them. You simply haven't allowed them to develop the skills or put them in an environment where they can develop the skills to do the stuff that you want them to do. So it's kind of, I really do think, as I said before, the outcomes we get, any of the outcomes we get in our organisation as leaders, they're our responsibility. If your managers aren't managing, it's your responsibility. You're somehow failing them. And I think that awareness is where you can start.
And let's acknowledge that most people end up in management roles having progressed through an organisation because they've been good at a technical role or a job in the business. They've shown some aptitude and some attitude and some skill, and next thing they've got manager or somewhere in their title.
Yeah.
Who's shown them what great management looks like? Throw people in the deep end and go, oh, I hope that works out.
Yeah.
And they're scrambling around. I heard one of our members refer to it as they felt like they had imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So they were being a manager,
Yeah.
and they didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't have a high level of confidence. They didn't have tools. They didn't have frameworks to use. So they felt like a bit of an imposter as a manager. Faking it. Yeah, totally.
I know.
They didn't have it.
Yeah. And particularly common in people's 30s when you're really kind of perhaps new to it. Particularly common if you haven't had any training in it, if you're new to it. I guess the scary thing I'm just reflecting on is how I have modelled management and leadership, and go back to where we started. I don't really I'm not really very good at it. So I probably have not taught people very well about how to manage from a personal example point of view.
We've talked in previous podcasts about how important awareness is.
Yeah.
And I think both as business leaders and managers, sometimes we're just not very aware of what great management looks like and how poor a job we're doing. And look, I don't mean poor as in nobody's trying, you've got a bad attitude. Everyone's trying really hard is what we observe, that people are putting in full commitment to their organisations and their roles.
Yeah.
They just lack the awareness of what greatness looks like around management.
But it does. It absolutely starts with the awareness piece is always the hard part. It's like the fish in water. When people realise that they actually don't like management, they realise that they shouldn't even be managing. What they should do is be developing a management team so that they can focus on creating, because that's where the biggest result they'll get is being able to focus on building the business, creating new markets, finding new customers, new product, playing. That's the gig.
Yeah, we refer to it as building the business machine.
Yeah,
and once the machine is cranking, it's going along with momentum, then that is when you can step away from the day-to-day operations and go and do the fun stuff that most of us like to do as owners and leaders.
And as always, the dilemma is, in order to get to that machine, you have to step back. You have to actually let people develop. Now, if you're going to do that in a reasonably well-managed way, then you need to have some clear lanes in which they can practice their swimming. You don't just kind of chuck them in the water, the deep end principle as I used to call it. You don't just chuck them in the water and see how they go. You actually need to spend the time with them, letting them go under their own steam, letting them make mistakes, giving them coaching. So, love to hear your comments about that kind of, how do you feel? Are you any good as a manager? Do you enjoy doing it?
Thanks for joining us today, guys. See you next time.
See ya.